The front door didn't creak. It clicked shut, soft, deliberate. Like she knew I was awake. Like she didn't want to wake guilt. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just watched her silhouette freeze in the hallway. Her keys hung still from her hand. And then it hit me. That smell. Cologne. Not mine. Not anything we owned. Too bold. Too deliberate. Too male. She stood there for maybe 5 seconds, probably less. Then walked in like it was normal. Hair slightly damp. Heels in her hand. That same gold necklace slightly twisted, like someone had gripped it. She avoided my eyes. Didn't mean to wake you, she said casually, sliding her phone into her purse. The same phone I'd called 4 times. No answer. No reply. I wasn't sleeping, I murmured. She smiled, quick and tight. We just lost track of time. Dylan had this ridiculous movie on, and... Who's Dylan? It came out sharper than I expected. She blinked. A coworker. I stared. She didn't elaborate. Just walked past me toward the kitchen, humming something under her breath. A tune I didn't recognize. She opened the fridge like this was Tuesday. Like she hadn't vanished for 11 hours. Like she didn't reek of someone else's skin. I texted, she said over her shoulder. No, I replied. You didn't. Her shoulders stiffened. Silence. I stood up. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. I was just there. Just the husband with a stomach full of something worse than betrayal confusion. Did you sleep with him? I asked it. Plain. Dry. Like I was asking about the weather. She turned slowly. Eyes wide. Then narrowed. What kind of question is that? She asked, suddenly on the edge of something sharp. You really don't trust me at all, do you? That was her defense. Accuse me of mistrust before I accuse you of truth. I didn't respond. Because I already knew the answer. Not from her lips, but from the smell still hanging in the air. The way her mascara curved like it had cried and been reapplied. The faint outline of where a wedding ring used to be and was no longer. She walked upstairs. I stood in the kitchen, and I realized I didn't know what scared me more. That she'd betrayed me. Or that she felt comfortable enough to come home afterward. I didn't follow her upstairs right away. I stood in the kitchen long enough to hear the water running in the bathroom. Not a shower, the sink. She was scrubbing something off. Maybe her hands. Maybe her neck. Or maybe just her conscience. There was a moment, a horrible, suspended moment, where I thought about walking in there and demanding the truth. Grabbing her phone, demanding she unlock it, screaming like some jealous caricature of a man. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew she wouldn't need to lie. She'd already prepared the version of events she'd drip-feed me like medicine. She always did. It would sound harmless. Clinical. Sanitized of emotion. And the worst part? I would probably nod and say, okay, like I always had. 15 minutes passed. Maybe 20. When she finally came downstairs again, her hair was tied up, her face bare, her ring finger still noticeably naked. She didn't sit. Didn't look at me. Just walked to the closet and pulled out her laptop bag like it was a normal morning, like we hadn't just collapsed in silence. I finally spoke. Why didn't you call? She hesitated. Her hand stayed on the zipper of her bag. Then she replied, not angry, not defensive, but hollow. My phone died. I figured you were asleep anyway. Her voice had that eerie calmness she used when she was lying but didn't want to escalate things. She'd weaponized softness. I stared at her as she pulled on a sweatshirt, something old and oversized. It almost made her look innocent. Almost. You could have used Dylan's phone, I said quietly. She shrugged. Didn't think of it. Did you sleep with him? The question sat between us, heavier now. This time I didn't whisper it. I needed her to hear how broken it sounded. Not accusing. Just desperate. She let out a sigh, not guilty, not ashamed. Annoyed. Jesus, Clay. No. We watched a couple of movies. I had wine. I passed out on the couch. That's all. The lies weren't even clever. That's what stung the most. They weren't built to convince. They were built to exhaust. She didn't want to win the argument. She wanted me too tired to keep asking. And maybe she was right. I didn't press it. I didn't scream or slam anything. I just nodded. Because in that moment, the scariest thing wasn't that she might have cheated. It was that I'd been rehearsing this moment in my head for weeks, and when it finally came, I was still too weak to walk away. She grabbed her bag, slipped on sneakers, and said she had an early team meeting. Kissed my cheek. Left without asking if I needed anything. When the door closed, I sat on the edge of the couch and stared at the phone she left charging on the counter. Unlocked. Not even hidden. She'd become so confident in my silence that she didn't feel the need to hide anything anymore. I picked it up. I didn't want to, but I had to. There were no messages from Dylan. No calls. No history. Nothing. Like you didn't exist. Except one thing. In her photos, there was a blurry shot taken the night before. A mirror selfie. She was in that burgundy dress. But standing just behind her, half out of frame, but unmistakably there, was a man's reflection. His hand rested on her hip. Her expression was soft, comfortable, like it wasn't a mistake, like it was a habit. And beneath it, a caption, just us and the city lights. It wasn't posted anywhere. It wasn't public. Just saved. Like a secret she didn't feel the need to delete. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. I locked it, placed it gently back on the counter like a confession in glass, and walked outside barefoot, into the morning fog. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat on the porch steps, shivering, as the sprinklers clicked on across the street. And I realized, this wasn't the moment she lost me. That had happened weeks ago. Maybe months. This was just the first time I was brave enough to notice. That day passed like I was watching someone else live it. I moved through the house in silence, brushing my teeth in slow circles, folding laundry that I didn't remember washing, answering work emails with empty words and auto responses. But all I could see every time I blinked was that photo, that hand, the quiet audacity of her saving it. She didn't hide it in a locked folder or tuck it away in the cloud. It was just there, like it didn't need to be protected, like I had already become harmless enough not to matter. Around noon, I finally caved and called Mark, my older brother. We hadn't talked in a few months, mostly because he has a life, a wife, 2 kids, and actual things to worry about. But I didn't know who else to speak to. I just needed someone who remembered who I used to be before I became whatever this version of me was. When he answered, I said nothing for a moment. I think he sensed it wasn't casual. "You all right?" he asked. "No," I said, with a laugh I didn't mean. Not even a little. He came over 2 hours later. No questions. Just a box of gas station donuts and that concerned older brother look that used to make me feel 12. I didn't tell him everything. I just said Delaney stayed out all night, came home smelling like someone else, and gave me a bedtime story meant for children. Mark's not the dramatic type. He didn't freak out or tell me to leave her. He just stared at the coffee table for a long time before asking, "Do you believe her?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He nodded. "Then you already know what to do." But that's not the hard part. The hard part is deciding when. He left an hour later. I stood at the window long after he pulled away, trying to figure out when I stopped believing in things like, "We'll figure it out." Somewhere between the broken texts and the late nights and the lies dressed up as logic, I lost the ability to imagine a version of us that felt real anymore. That evening, Delaney came home early. Around 6:30. No lipstick. No perfume. Just her and a plastic bag from a Thai place I knew she didn't like. "I thought you liked their green curry," she said, setting it down on the counter like a peace offering. I nodded. "Thanks." We ate at the kitchen island. She scrolled her phone between bites. I asked her how work was. She said it was quiet. She didn't mention Dylan. Didn't mention the night before. It was like that entire fracture didn't exist in her timeline. But then, something happened. As I was rinsing my plate, she came up behind me, wrapped her arms around me, her head on my back. "I love you. You know that?" she said softly, like she was trying to melt into me. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't even warmth. It was strategy. I didn't respond. I just stood there, frozen, while her fingers rested against the center of my chest. And in that moment, I realized something awful. I wasn't afraid she had cheated. I was afraid she hadn't. Because if she hadn't, then this was just who she was now, cold, strategic, dismissive, and all of it was still somehow my fault for becoming invisible. Later that night, I watched her sleep. She looked peaceful, untouched by guilt, like whatever version of the truth she lived in had already replaced the reality we shared. I turned to face the ceiling, and I decided I was going to find Dylan, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to see the face of the man who held my wife at 3 a.m. while I folded her laundry and worried about her deadlines. The next morning, I skipped work. I told my manager I had a stomach bug, but in truth, I just couldn't handle pretending everything was normal for 8 hours straight. I needed time. I needed to think, to investigate, to do something other than sit in the passenger seat of my own life while my marriage quietly bled out in the trunk. Delaney had already left for work by the time I got up. Her side of the bed was made, too neatly. That wasn't like her. She hated morning tidiness. The pillows were fluffed, the sheets tucked, everything just a little too perfect, like she was trying to erase any trace of her presence. Or guilt. Or both. I started with what little I had. That blurry photo with the mystery man, the name Dylan, and the knowledge that she worked in the marketing division of a mid-sized civic outreach firm downtown. I'd never been interested in the details of her co-workers before. That was my mistake. I assumed knowing their names didn't matter if you trusted someone. But now, names were everything. Names were leads. And I was desperate for clarity. I pulled out her laptop from under the couch. She'd used it the night before and forgotten to log out. My stomach twisted with guilt even as I lifted the lid. But let's be honest, what's worse? A husband looking for answers, or a wife hiding things worth finding? I clicked through her recent tabs. Emails. Slack. An open PDF proposal. Nothing unusual at first, until I found a folder on her desktop titled Pitch Concepts, April. I opened it. Inside were 3 documents and a PowerPoint deck. It was the second document that caught me off guard. Joint Strategy Outline, DP plus DM. DM. Dylan M. I opened it. It wasn't incriminating. Not directly. But there were comments in the margins. Friendly. Too friendly. Little jokes. Inside references. Emojis. That wouldn't have bothered me normally. But in one thread near the bottom, Delaney wrote, "Let's just hope Sunday night doesn't become a regular thing, or I'll never get home before sunrise grinning face with sweat." That date matched the night. The 5 a.m. night. The one she claimed was innocent. The one where they watched movies and fell asleep. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I searched his name. Dylan McCrae. A LinkedIn profile popped up. Tall, blonde, former college swimmer, now project lead for regional outreach. Handsome in the kind of smug, forgettable way that makes people like me look invisible in photographs. I clicked through his public photos. And then I saw it. A group shot, taken at some firm fundraiser weeks ago. 10 people lined up in a dimly lit bar, plastic cups in hand, cheesy grins plastered across their faces. And there, in the middle, Delaney. Leaning into him. Not touching, but leaning. Her head tilted just enough that it made you wonder if that photo was taken seconds before something crossed a line. I zoomed in. His hand was behind her back. Just barely. But I could see it. They were too close. Too familiar. And yet, still ambiguous enough to explain away. It was almost worse than a smoking gun. This wasn't a scandal. It was something more dangerous, a possibility. I spent the rest of the day spiraling. Reading every thread. Every Slack joke. Every time he used a winking emoji or she laughed back in code I couldn't understand. Every second I spent doing this felt like I was cutting open my own chest just to measure how bad the damage was. It wasn't healthy. It wasn't smart. But it was necessary. At 5:15 p.m., Delaney texted me. Staying late. Strategy review ran long. Don't wait up. It felt like she was mocking me. I stared at that message until the screen dimmed. And I made a decision. I was going to see them. I was going to her office. Not to confront. Not to cause a scene. Just to watch. To finally see for myself. Not what she said, but what she did when she thought I wasn't looking. Because trust wasn't something you built anymore. Not with Delaney. Now it was something you spied on quietly. And the worst part? I didn't even feel ashamed for doing it. I felt relieved. I drove to her office building that night, stomach churning, palms damp against the steering wheel. I didn't have a plan. I wasn't there to catch her in some soap opera betrayal scene. No lipstick stains or shadowy alley kisses. I just wanted to see her. Observe her in a space that didn't include me. To watch her live in that alternate version of herself that didn't require my presence or permission. The building was still lit up when I pulled into the back of the parking lot. Floor 3 had the marketing division. A couple of silhouettes moved behind the frosted glass, too blurred to identify, too real to ignore. I turned off the engine and sat there like a sad extra in my own life, breathing against the silence and waiting for the next frame to change. At 6:41 p.m., I saw her. She walked past the window, laughing. Laughing like she hadn't just fractured everything sacred between us. Her hair was pulled back, sleeves rolled, like she was mid-presentation or maybe pretending to be. And then he appeared behind her, Dylan McCrae, in the flesh. I recognized him immediately from the LinkedIn profile. Taller than I expected. Confident posture. A man who looked like he didn't ask permission for anything. He handed her a folder. She leaned in close, closer than needed, said something that made him smirk. They both looked at something on his phone. She tapped the screen and bit her lower lip. Not flirtatious enough to indict her, but not professional either. I sat in my car for another hour. Watched as one by one the lights went out. People trickled out. And then finally, just before 8 o'clock, the two of them emerged together. They didn't touch. They didn't even walk shoulder to shoulder. But I saw it. I saw the way she smiled when he said something just before unlocking his car. That kind of smile that said she didn't want the night to end yet. The kind of smile she hadn't given me in months. I ducked lower in the seat. Pathetic, I know. A full-grown man hiding behind a steering wheel while his wife played out a life he was no longer invited to. She got into her car. Drove off alone. He stayed behind, sitting in his. I half expected him to check his phone and laugh at whatever inside joke they just shared. But instead, he stared at the dashboard for a long time. Like he was thinking. Or regretting. Or maybe just plotting the next move. I followed her. Not far, just enough to see that she didn't deter. She went straight home. Parked. Took a moment in the driveway like she was collecting herself before stepping into our house. I pulled up 10 minutes later and entered quietly. She was on the couch, legs tucked under her, scrolling her phone. Hey, she said casually. You're home late. I went for a drive, I replied, not sure if my voice cracked or not. She looked at me for a beat too long. I thought she might ask what was wrong, but she didn't. She patted the couch beside her and said, Come sit. I just started something dumb on Netflix. I sat. Numb. The show was background noise. I couldn't even register the plot. I just stared at her, the profile of a woman I used to know, pretending to be exactly who I remembered. But now every blink, every breath, every glance held questions. About 30 minutes in, she reached for my hand. It was meant to feel reassuring. A gesture of normalcy. But her thumb rubbed slow circles into my palm like she was soothing a stranger. And I realized, maybe that's what we were now. Two strangers rehearsing the muscle memory of marriage. Holding hands out of habit, not love. I didn't pull away. I didn't want to give her a reason to lie more creatively tomorrow. But in my head, I had already started planning something I never thought I'd need to. I was going to talk to Dylan. Face to face. Not because I thought he'd admit anything, but because I needed to see if the man who stood inches from my wife's laughter knew exactly how deep he was standing in someone else's marriage. And if he didn't, I wanted to be the one to tell him. The hardest part wasn't watching her lie. It was realizing how easy it had become for her to do it. The next day, I left the house under the pretense of a dentist appointment, but in reality, I drove straight to Dylan's office. I had no plan for what I'd say. I wasn't sure what I hoped would happen. Maybe I just wanted to see if the man who'd crept into my life without knocking even knew what he'd broken into. Or if he cared. The receptionist told me he was out to lunch. I waited in my car across the street like some washed-out detective from a bad movie. When he returned, he was alone. Wearing sunglasses, sipping from a green smoothie cup, typing with one hand as he walked. Carefree. Smooth. Like nothing in his life was fragile. I followed him as he entered the building. I knew I had minutes, maybe less. I waited until the elevator doors closed, then stepped inside behind him. Just us. He didn't recognize me at first. Why would he? To him, I was just a name my wife probably left out of every story. Dylan? I said, voice low. He glanced sideways, confused. Yeah, I'm Delaney's husband. There. The moment. His shoulders stiffened, not a lot, but enough. Just that fractional tension that betrays more than words ever could. His lips parted, but nothing came out at first. I watched a dozen possible responses flash through his eyes before he landed on a neutral smile. Oh, well. Hey, didn't expect to meet you here. I figured. The elevator doors opened. We stepped into the hallway, tension suddenly thick between us. He gestured toward a glass-walled conference room and said, You, want to sit? I nodded. We entered the empty room. The door clicked shut behind us, and for a second, the world outside felt muffled. Like we were underwater. I'm not here to accuse you of anything, I started, even though that was a lie. I just want to ask one thing. And I want the truth, not the rehearsed kind. He leaned forward. Okay, what exactly is going on between you and my wife? His jaw tightened. Just a little. His fingers tapped against the table, a rhythm too calm for someone innocent. Then, after a long pause, he said, Nothing that crosses the line. It wasn't a denial. It was a dance around the truth. Carefully choreographed. Like he'd used that sentence before. I kept my eyes on him. That's not what I asked. Another pause. Then, she's complicated. Look, man, if there's tension between you two, maybe you should talk to her. I'm not. You're not what? I interrupted. You're not the guy walking her to her car at 8 p.m. after laughing through strategy meetings? You're not the guy she smiles at and ways she stopped smiling at me? Because I've seen it. And if I've seen it, that means you know exactly what's going on. He looked away. That was answer enough. She said you were just coworkers, I added quietly. That you passed out watching movies. That there was no reason to worry. He didn't laugh, but I saw the smirk flicker. It wasn't cruel, just tired. Like he'd already given up pretending anything was black and white. I think you already know, he finally said. You're just hoping I'll say it out loud so you can stop living in limbo. You're right, I whispered. I need to hear it. He looked me in the eye and said nothing. But his silence, calm, resigned, deliberate, was louder than any confession. I stood up and walked out. No shouting. No punches. No threats. Just the slow, bitter confirmation that I was now a third wheel in my own marriage. When I got home, Delaney was in the backyard, watering the garden. The picture of domestic peace. The hose looped around her wrist like a ribbon in some quiet celebration of normal life. I watched her from the kitchen window, and I realized something far more dangerous than betrayal. She still believed she hadn't done anything wrong, because to her, there was no proof. No affair. No dramatic kiss. No late-night hotel receipts. Just two people skimming the edge of something that could destroy a life, and doing it with just enough subtlety to claim innocence. She came in a few minutes later, cheeks flushed from the heat. You okay? She asked. I'm fine, I lied. And I smiled back. Because now, I had something more powerful than suspicion. I had clarity, and the quiet resolve to stop asking for the truth and start acting like I already had it. The next week passed in slow motion. Everything Delaney did seemed rehearsed now, carefully placed kisses on the cheek, casual, love yous, dropped like punctuation, dinners cooked just a little too well. Her behavior didn't scream guilt. It whispered maintenance, like she was keeping the illusion upright, not because she believed in it, but because she didn't want it to collapse on her watch. I played along. I kissed back. I laughed at the right lines. I even helped her prep for the Friday charity gala her firm was sponsoring, the one she said she had to attend because the board will be there, and image is everything. That phrase stayed with me. Image is everything. Not truth. Not love. Not safety. Image. By Thursday night, I'd rehearsed it all in my head. What I would say. What I would do. But nothing prepared me for what actually happened. Friday arrived, and we got dressed together. She wore a navy blue dress that wrapped tightly around her ribs and fell just above her knees. It was elegant, timeless, really, and it made her look untouchable. I wore the same gray blazer I always wore to weddings and funerals. I remember adjusting my collar in the mirror and realizing, for the first time, how old I looked standing next to her. When we arrived at the gala, everything was perfect. Candlelight. Jazz trio in the corner. Too much perfume in the air. People air-kissing and pretending to remember each other's names. It was the kind of scene where everyone performs a version of themselves that sounds wealthier and happier than they really are. Delaney drifted away as soon as we entered. She knew people. I didn't. I hung around the perimeter, sipping soda from a glass that pretended to be crystal. I was content to observe, to track her from across the room. But then I saw something I hadn't anticipated. She wasn't with Dylan. She was with a man I didn't recognize. Tall. Black suit. Younger. Very polished, like he practiced eye contact in a mirror before events like this. She laughed at something he said, touched his arm, not possessively, but with a softness I hadn't seen before. I waited for her to introduce me. She didn't. Instead, she whispered something in his ear, walked across the room, grabbed 2 drinks from the bar, one with a lime, one with a twist, and handed him the correct one without asking. She knew his drink. My chest tightened. I tried to breathe slowly, to anchor myself in the room. Maybe Dylan was just a distraction. Maybe the Rayal story was someone else entirely, someone I didn't even see coming. Delaney finally returned to me about 20 minutes later. Her hand slid around my back like nothing had happened. Sorry, she said, eyes sparkling. Got caught up. Boring donors. Who's the guy in the black suit? I asked casually. She blinked. Oh, no one. That's Caleb. Works with our design vendors. Harmless. I nodded. Like Dylan. Her jaw barely twitched. But I saw it. I told you, she said slowly. There's nothing going on with Dylan. And with Caleb? She stared at me for half a second longer than she needed to, then smiled too wide. You're being weird. Come on, let's find our table. We did. The rest of the evening was a blur of speeches and toasts and polite conversation. Delaney was a perfect hostess, a flawless wife. She touched my hand during the auction, whispered jokes during the slideshow. But it was all so clean. Too clean. Like she was building a wall of normalcy between us brick by smiling brick. And then came the final blow. When we got home, I went to take off my shoes by the door. She walked upstairs. Moments later, I heard her phone ring in the bedroom. I wouldn't have gone near it, if not for the fact that it stopped ringing and then started again. Same number. Twice. Something in me broke. I walked into the room. She was in the bathroom, door cracked, humming as she pulled her earrings off. Her phone lit up. Same name. Caleb. No last name. Just Caleb. With a heart emoji next to it. My hands started shaking. I picked it up. I wasn't going to answer, just see. The latest message thread was pinned to the top. Caleb. Still thinking about that second goodnight. You didn't have to say it twice unless you meant it. And her reply, only 20 minutes before we left the gala. Delaney. Maybe I did. She walked out of the bathroom, still humming. Saw me holding the phone. Saw the screen. For the first time in weeks, her face actually changed. No calm mask. No flirty shrug. Just pure, unfiltered panic. She opened her mouth. I held up a hand. I don't want a speech, I said. I don't want a story. I just want you to sit with this. With what you've done. With how far this went. And how you expected me to never notice. She stepped forward. Clay, wait, it's not. No, I said. You already said it. You just didn't use your voice. And then I left. Not the house. Not the marriage. Just the room. Just enough to give her space to feel the silence she'd been drowning me in for months. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch with a blanket pulled over my chest, listening to the clock tick like it was marking the seconds before the next version of my life began. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only something smaller and sadder in its place. A quiet certainty that nothing I could say would ever change what had already happened. Around 4 a.m., Delaney sat on the floor beside the couch. She didn't speak for a while, just sat there in silence, her knees pulled to her chest, hands wrapped around them like a child being punished by the weight of her own choices. I didn't mean for it to become anything, she said finally, her voice barely audible. I didn't respond. I was lonely. I felt like we were just roommates. And when someone saw me, really saw me, it made me feel alive again. But I never stopped loving you. I just forgot how to show it. I turned my head, met her eyes. She was crying. Genuinely. Not from guilt, but from something far more rare, regret. She reached out, her fingers brushing mine. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold her hand either. You could have told me that before you let someone else become your mirror, I said quietly. Before you built an entire secret life in the shadows of our routine. I know, she whispered. And I'll live with that. Whatever happens next. I understand. She stood, kissed my forehead, and went upstairs. That was the moment it hit me. She wasn't fighting anymore. She wasn't defending. She was surrendering to the truth. In the morning, I packed a bag. Not out of rage. Not to punish her. But because I needed clarity, real clarity. Not the kind you get from digging through someone's phone or watching them from parking lots. I needed to stand on my own feet again. I'd spent months crawling around in the ashes of a fire I didn't start, trying to put it out with my bare hands. She came downstairs as I zipped my duffel. Are you leaving for good? She asked, voice shaking. I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the woman who betrayed me, but the one who once danced barefoot with me in our first apartment kitchen, laughing at burned toast and pretending it was gourmet. I don't know, I said honestly, but I'm leaving for me. Not because of Caleb, not because of Dylan, but because I need to remember who I am when I'm not orbiting around someone else's gravity. She nodded, tears running down her cheeks now. I hope you find peace, she said. I already have, I replied, because I'm finally choosing myself. I walked out the front door into a morning that felt different, lighter somehow. Not because I had escaped the pain, but because I had accepted it, and I wasn't carrying her guilt anymore. I left it behind, folded in the sheets and lingering in the perfume she no longer wore for me. Over the next few weeks, I stayed at my brother's guest house. I started therapy, got back into sketching, something I hadn't done since college. I even joined a group at a local library where people talked about rebuilding after trust collapses. And one night, while sketching at a quiet park bench, a woman sat next to me. She didn't flirt. She didn't pry. She just asked what I was drawing. We talked for an hour. She told me she had gone through a divorce last year, that she wasn't ready for anything serious, but she missed honest conversation. So did I. And just like that, no drama, no fireworks, something new began. Not a rebound. Not a rescue. Just a connection built on truth, not denial. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen.